Welcome back to the next segment at Ekonmernas Dagar. We now are going to move on to Sissela Nutley, who is here with us today. She is quite different from the other participants today. She is a brain scientist and also an author. So what will happen is that she will now, first of all, have a presentation held for you guys, where that will be followed up with some questions with Sissela. But I will now leave the floor to you, Sissela. So please take it away.
Thank you so much. Well, I'd like to address the topic of mental health and how we interact with our digital devices, and if there's a connection between how we feel and how we spend our time today. This is, of course, a very hot topic because this involves all of us. Everybody now has gone from not having a smartphone 10 years ago to us all spending about 4 or 5 hours a day on these devices. And I think it's obvious for everyone that there are so many benefits that have come from this type of available technology, but they have also become very much integrated with our lifestyle habits, and they perhaps also interfere with our relationships and some of our health factors. About 20% report that they sleep with their cell phone in their bed. And of course, that may have an impact on sleep. So what actually determines our well-being? There are three major factors that are involved here, and some of them we can affect and some we can't. Like our genes, we can't really do anything about our genes, of course. But we have different susceptibility to becoming depressed or more anxious, and that is something that is good to know. If you have this in your family, then it's even more important to try and affect your habits, because that's the portion you can change. We also have a life situation that can or can't be changed. Some things are just the way they are. We perhaps have a chronic disease, or we've had trauma in our life, or we don't really decide which family we grow up in or where we're born in the world, and so on. This affects our mental health as well. But the part that we do all have a possibility to affect is what we do with our time. And this affects as much as 40% of our mental well-being. And that is a very hopeful number, because it means that we can do something about how we feel. This is especially important during this time. We've now gone 1 year into this pandemic, where all of our habits and routines have perhaps been thrown out the window, and a lot of us are struggling with keeping our mental health at a level where we feel okay. And I just want to tell you that you are not alone if you feel this way. This is something that everyone is struggling with to some degree, and there is help to get, and I would like to tell you some more about which factors that we can all affect to strengthen our mental well-being. Because all of this actually happens in our brains. So what we feel, how we think, and eventually how we behave is a consequence of activity in the brain. And when we're born, we have 100 billion nerve cells, and they're not connected in the beginning. They have to find out and figure out which other nerve cells to connect to, and that is based on what we do with our time, what we're exposed to, what we train on, and what we repeat. So what we repeat often creates networks in the brain with strong synapses. That's the connection between two neurons. And the more we do something, it can be when we try and practice a handstand or learning math, tables to multiply things and all of that. If we practice a lot on the same thing, it builds a strong automatized network. But the same goes with the thought processes that we have. And if we keep repeating loops in our mind, we all have weird thoughts, it's true. And if we keep repeating the same thing over and over again, it creates a strong network for those kinds of thoughts. So what we can do is try and challenge these thoughts that we have, because they're not truth. They are just rehearsed repetitions of the same network that become more easily activated the more we think them. So this is important to know because sometimes we think that what we think is true. It is not true. It's an interpretation based on experiences and different things. And we can change how our brain works. We can change the synapses and create new ones and have alternative routes that support our thinking. But it takes time and it takes practice. And we know from research which 7 factors that are needed to have the best possible outcome when it comes to our mental health. And it's these 7. It's called the Healthy Mind Platter. And just like we know what to eat to have a well-balanced diet, we know these 7 activities actually affect how we feel. So quickly to go through them, it's exercise, of course. This has an immediate and long-term effect on our mental well-being. Sleep is one of the most important factors for keeping depression and anxiety away. Downtime, that means having some time when we don't have constant flow of information going our way, but when we actually just let our own thoughts bounce around, whatever they may be. This can be scary, but it's needed for recovery. Relationships, we all need to feel important to somebody else, and there are many different ways to show that. And right now, some of those ways are taken away from us, and it puts this one in particular at a challenging point. Activities, we need to have something that makes us want to get up in the morning. If it's to play paddle or the violin or anything that makes you feel like, oh, I'm going to do this. It's Wednesday. Yes. Good focus time, that means knowing how limited our cognitive abilities are when it comes to easily getting distracted and respecting those boundaries. Creating a good environment for when you want to focus and study and get something done. Chill time. This is the time where nowadays a lot of us spend it on digital media, and we need this type of time too, just to chill and relax and not feel like we have to perform. And this can be digital or non-digital, as long as it doesn't put a strain on us to where we feel stressed or where we feel like we're expected to perform. And what we see in research, if you look at big studies investigating if there's a relationship between the time we spend on social media and depression symptoms, for instance, there does seem to be a relationship where excessive amounts of time spent on social media is connected to higher risk of reporting symptoms of depression. And it's too early really to say if social media leads to depression or if it's the other way around, that if you're already feeling a bit sad, you tend to move more into spending your time on social media. It looks like it's a little bit of both, like it's a reinforcing cycle. But when we look at these factors, there seems to be 2 different mechanisms explaining this. And that is first, of course, the background factors, like I mentioned, genes and life situations, which we can't really change. This already has a connection to our mental well-being. And then we add our time on digital media, and then it depends on how much time we spend. And if you think about the day only having 24 hours, of course, if you spend a large amount of time on digital media, it's going to crowd out some of these other factors that we need to feel good, like sleep, exercise, and so on. We call this indirect effects. The other path is through the content that we're actually consuming. So that's a direct effect. If we're spending our time, is the sound going out or no? Good. Then I'll keep speaking. So the direct effects, that depends on the actual content of what you're consuming. So if you're being harassed or if you're having a healthy, supportive conversation about your mental health, it'll have completely different effects on you, of course. But also what you consume in your social media flow, in your feed. If you are looking at a lot of unrealistic beauty ideals, research shows that you will in time become less and less content with your own body. So there is a connection with what you consume and how that makes you feel over time. And speaking of these indirect effects, the last reports from the government media authorities show that 3 out of 4 teens and young adults report that their digital media habits every week crowd out other activities such as sleep and exercise. So this seems to be like people are actually using digital media more than they want to. And perhaps a lot of you relate to that as well. I certainly do. And in this project that I'm working on, it's called Det syns inte. We're run by a nonprofit organization called Arts and Hearts. We also gather data, and we've done a study on about 2,000 Swedish youth over the past 2 years. And if we look at the different factors of the Healthy Mind Platters, only 20% get their daily recommended dose of exercise, which is 60 minutes a day. Only 25% reach the recommendations for sleep. 25% spend less than 10 minutes with doing nothing a day. 60% state that they seldom or never talk to anybody about their mental health issues. 35% do not have a hobby or any type of activity. 20% have good focus time. The other 80% do digital media multitasking with stuff unrelated to the task to some degree. 65% spend more than 4 hours a day on digital media in their free time. So from this we can conclude that a lot of people are struggling with having balance in these protective factors. And it's not so difficult to understand because so much of our modern lifestyle keeps us busy and distracted, and it crowds out some of these very basic needs that we have. In this initiative, Det syns inte, which was originally a musical, this is the only time I say thanks to the pandemic. We have moved our digital initiatives along very quickly. We're sad to not play the musical at the moment, but we have developed instead digital tools, free and available to look at what we can do to support our mental health. So we have an app where all of these 7 factors are explained, and there are tips listed to each of them, what you can do to try and increase what you would like to do more of. It's not so fun to say, oh, just stop or decrease the time you're spending on your cell phone. Yeah, right. I mean, we've all been there. We've all tried that. What we need to do is focus on the things that we would like to do more of instead, and it'll figure itself out. So if you want to do a self-assessment and see which area you would like to start with, you can do that. And there are different ways to help you think about these difficult thoughts and feelings in the moment that you're having them, and how to support your habits so that they don't come as often. Just to have a few send-offs. If you haven't discovered nature yet and the magical effects, research is very clear on this. If you spend at least 2 hours a week in nature, you will have a better mental well-being. And if you do it without having any devices or information being sent your way, you will activate this beautiful network in the brain called the default mode network, which is also going to be activated when you feel thankful. So trying to find things that you're thankful for, even during these difficult times, will help you activate hormones in your body, oxytocin, that dampens your stress and increases your well-being. There are lots more resources. We have a podcast called Det syns inte, the app that is available to download. You can follow us on Instagram, and I also wrote a book on this called Distraherad, hjärnan, skärmen och krafterna bakom, that you can find as well. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for that very, very interesting presentation. I mean, these are questions that I think tend to be overlooked, and maybe especially in a time of crisis, more immediate health issues such as the physical ones tends to be a lot of the focus on. But obviously, these are issues that are critical for, as you're saying, our mental health.
Indeed.
So I would like to touch upon especially one out of these 7 parts that you had, which tends to be talked a lot about. We know that exercise is very important for our mental health. But what does that actually mean? How much exercise do we actually have to do to really gain these benefits?
Well, I'm sure you've heard everything counts, and this is true. So anything is better than nothing. Um, and you can see really positive effects from 15 minutes of exercise a day. That actually seems to increase our lifespan, life expectancy with 3 years. So if we can get
That's a
15
lot.
minutes a day, we live longer. But if we can do, a couple of times a week, 20 minutes per week, we seem to have a good effect on depression symptoms and so on. So there's effects that go in the long run that are very positive, obviously, on all aspects, the brain and the body, obviously. But then there's immediate effects. So if you're studying, after about 25 minutes, the brain starts to going into like a sleep mode, or it activates like a screensaver on
Yeah.
the computer. So after 25 minutes, which is also about the same time as how long we're able to focus well, then we need a break. So those two coincide. We have about 25 minutes, then we're not performing as well.
Yeah.
So then it's time to stand up and walk around. And it's not enough just to stand up. So you have to walk around a little bit, or do, like some training your muscles for a little bit, and then you get a very measurable positive effect on your focus immediately.
Yeah, that's very interesting considering that most of what we tend to do today, and especially this part of the world, is we need to focus for about 8 hours a day. And
Yeah.
it's sort of assumed to be doing that straight. And sure, we can take breaks, but I know for a fact that I don't take a break every 25 minutes, which then is obviously needed.
Yes.
But
Absolutely.
so now we know a little bit about how little effort it actually could take. But what does exercise really mean? Do we mean that one needs to go to the gym, or what does that mean?
No, you definitely don't need to go to the gym. You have to start where you are. So if that means just getting out of the house and walking around the block, that is awesome. And especially now when we're in the pandemic, and it's easy to just kind of crawl out of bed and log into the computer, the first lecture, and you kind of
Yeah,
just stay in the same energy, in the same mode.
yeah,
If you can break that and just get up and get out of the house, even if it's just walking around the block, then go back in and start up your day, it's a completely different mental state that you're going into the day with. So, but to answer your question, exercise, what you're talking about when you want to have these long-term effects is to raise the pulse and, work up a sweat optimally. So you can think that you've gone up to the right pace if you can't really carry a conversation easily. So you have to be a little out of breath.
that's a good rule of thumb then to feel like
Yeah.
you're doing enough.
Yes.
So obviously you've talked a lot about that, and maybe what you just said is one answer, but are there any other answers to the question about how we can avoid getting stuck in these negative thoughts that both COVID possesses, but also just in general?
Absolutely. I think a lot of the negative thought patterns that we have um, tend to be around things that we maybe can't control. We have regrets about the past, or we think we know what's going to happen in the future. We worry about things that might happen. And a trick there is to always ask yourself, what can I control? What is out of my control? And it's helpful to even write it down. Like if you can name the thoughts you're having and list them, and then say, okay, this is out of my control. That already happened. So scratch that.
Yeah.
What out of these things that are bothering me or that are taking up my brain capacity can I actually affect myself? And try and stay here and now. Just focus on things that are right in front of you. What can I do now? Okay, maybe I can have a glass of water. Maybe I can go for a walk around the block. Just keep your mind very close to actionable items here and now.
Sort of small victories in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's very interesting and also very doable even in these times.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have one more question for you that I would have liked to know the answer already several years ago. But if you could put yourself in the situation of being a student today, and say that you had 15 to 30 minutes a day that you would do something that has a positive impact on your general well-being, what would you say that would be and why?
I would actually reinforce the point about trying to get out into nature somehow. So I would go for a walk every day and try and actually leave my phone at home during that. So if you can get out during lunch or whenever it suits you, just to walk for 20 minutes or half an hour without your phone, then you really get access to other areas of your brain. You get to reboot your energy, and this has been shown to have very positive effects on your mental well-being. So a walk in some type of natural setting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful advice, and I hope that you students at home might take that offer up and actually really engage in nature, even in these critical times. But with that, we are going to wrap up this session. So thank you so much for your time, Sissela. It's been truly inspiring, I think, and I hope that our viewers, and I think that our viewers share the same picture. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And we will be shortly back again after a commercial break. Thank you.